So, hi everyone. Very warm welcome to another live session of the AWS Founders Series. And if you've seen everything before, really this is our opportunity to go behind the scenes with some of Africa's most successful and sometimes most resilient companies, often tech companies. Today, we really are speaking with a true pioneer. It's Pieter de Villiers. He's the co-founder and CEO of Clickatell, a global messaging and chat and commerce platform. He's going to go into more details about what that actually means. What's important for me and hopefully you guys is it started small. It started in Cape Town, an apartment, 4 friends, 4 lines of code and pretty much a crazy idea. And through that, 25 years later, they are absolutely a titan in that messaging industry. They go on and we're going to learn about how they've attracted capital, how they got in touch with Sequoia, how their relationship with WhatsApp was actually generated, the importance of relationships. We're going to dive into as much as we possibly can, the good, the bad, and the ugly of entrepreneurship, where we stand as South Africa, and everything else in between. And of course, if you have lived in and joined us on one of these things before, we want your questions. It's not just my opportunity to go and ask what I want to Pieter. Hopefully, we get all of you to share your questions too, and certainly we're going to ask the best ones. With that, Pieter, thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Colin, and thanks to AWS that's helped tell these stories. I think being a founder or entrepreneur is a lonely path, and if you listen to others' journey, sometimes some nuggets that's helpful.
Let's start for context. A lot of people actually, strangely, have never heard of Clickatell. I was one of those a couple of months back. What is Clickatell? What does it do?
Yeah, most people don't know about the company because it's a B2B company, which means it sells to other enterprises. So it's not a consumer offering. And so unless you are a CIO or CTO in a large consumer business, you typically won't know about us. But if you do serve your clients and trying to interact or transact with your larger customer base, then you certainly will be a well-known brand in your world. Clickatell really has got an interesting story because we were 4 young and arguably dumb founders. We wanted to do something in the internet. We're very much inspired by Fortune magazine articles of these incredible companies being built. And so we were crazy enough to start our own internet business in the middle of 2000s. The dot-com bubble burst shortly after. So that was an interesting navigation opportunity for us in any case. But essentially, we stumbled across quite a big problem, which was the internet of the day did not speak to the mobile phone at the time. And so if you think about it, today, mobile and internet is joined at the hip. It's one universe. But back then, your phone could do 2 things. It could talk and text. And the internet was a whole separate universe. So click for internet, tel for telecommunication on a mobile phone. Clickatell became the first interface to help an internet website or piece of software communicate to a mobile phone via text message or SMS, as we call it. And yeah, we launched that offering in November 2000.
Now you make that sound really easy, but how did you get into that? Because, to fast forward, you've gone to school, you've gone to university, you've moved into a totally different profession. You started off in optometry. You've talked about that, before. I can't for the life of me understand how you can go from optometry to go and start becoming the co-founder of one of, South Africa's most successful global businesses. How did that happen?
Well, I think there's a lot of things that is at play. I mean, first of all, entrepreneurs normally either leave a situation that they're uncomfortable with or a job they don't like, or they see an opportunity. And kind of for us, it was 2 things, and for me personally, 2 things at once. Remember, optometry or any science degree, your subjects is maths, physics, arithmetic in optics. So you are still in sciences. It's just a very different place. The fun thing about optometry, by the way, is that it's the only place where the human body, which is biological, and physical lenses interact. And so it really is the early version of where technology meets human. And I think what happens in humanoids going forward, optometry certainly would have been an interesting environment to learn from. Virtual reality was my thesis when I studied. But needless to say, to your question, I think we are in another opportunity right now with AI, where you can know pretty much very little about a sector or industry. But if you're an early mover, if you're curious, and if you're willing to work hard, you can really create something in a new sort of, blank canvas space. And for us, that was the internet. Back then, no one was an expert on the internet. Nothing was really making money on the internet. And so if you had an idea and you're willing to work hard, then 5 years into the internet, you were an expert because you were an early starter, early adopter. So I think if in many ways, as long as you like problem solving, as long as you're willing to get stuck in, that's open to anyone. And for us,
What did
we
you
were just
actually do though? Because you're busy being an optometrist. You're actually working. You've got a proper day there. You're up in, is it Joburg, I'm guessing. How do you go and did you just sort of step back and say, right, enough? I'm walking out of this. How did that actually go? And I'm interested in that because it's a question we get from entrepreneurs a lot of the time. You know, how do you go and take that level of risk? Because if you're going to be an entrepreneur, it might fail. You might not make any money. One viewpoint is, I guess, when you're young, you don't have a lot to lose, so this is an ideal time to do it. On the other hand, you're giving up being on the corporate rung. You could be going through and starting to get promoted and really position yourself for a fantastic corporate career. It's really a very interesting position you've got to take if you want to become an entrepreneur. What did you do to go and make this decision that you're going to give it a go?
Look, Colin, I had a scholarship, so first and foremost, I had to fulfill my obligation for 1 year. If I didn't have the scholarship to work back, I probably would have quit within weeks of starting optometry, because I knew in an instant that while you study, you got all of these interesting subjects, you are learning about complex problems, but in practice, and no offense to optometrists, but in practice you're really a shopkeeper. And no one really tells you that if you're a youngster. I wasn't smart enough to do job shadowing and things like that. I just thought that this is a science degree that looks interesting. So first of all, how that happens is that your wife tells you that you look deeply unhappy. And I have an incredible wife, Maria, and she's also the one that enabled me to just quit my job, because she was working at the time. I think that we were young, we didn't have children, and we were able to quit the day job in a way that we could still make it work all around. So for me, it was an easy decision, to be honest. I was never going to join a corporate. That's not the world I come from. My dad's an entrepreneur, and I was lucky enough to distinctly remember sitting at the bottom of his feet by his desk, listening how he's doing businesses and deals and everything else. And to a large extent, I think there's something in the air then. If you're lucky enough to have an entrepreneur father or mother, something kind of clicks, and you're not afraid of the unknown, to be honest.
Then what did you do to start forming the idea? I mean, we know, or I know from the research I've done, I don't know if everyone else knows, let's not make that assumption, but you founded the company. You had three co-founders, with you, Danny DeToy, Patrick Lawson, and your brother Casper. And how did that come about, to start having that communication with each other, finding each other, and then starting to brainstorm and coming up with those initial ideas, which I believe were related to the travel industry?
Yeah, I shared some of this before, but it's interesting. We really looked at what was making money on the web at the time, and it was really travel and adult content. And as I often say, my twin brother and I was never going to sell the adult content concept to our parents, and so it had to be travel. And our idea on travel was really spurred by friends who worked in London and in Europe, and often spoke about these trips to Amsterdam or Dublin. And we were looking to give a low-cost offer for people to really get 50% plus discounts on their travel, like lastminute.com type construct. But the average person...
Can we just pause there, actually? Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
I'll try not to do this too many times, but that last point that you made, I think, is so important. You actively researched and looked, for pieces. You're living in the dot-com area, where obviously everything's moving to the internet. It's those nascent days. It reminds me very much of the story of Amazon. in terms of those early days. Exactly the same process where Bezos was looking for something which had kind of exponential growth. You could see the internet growing, hundreds of millions of people every year. And he looked for a homogenous product which he could launch, which actually he came up with books. He had no knowledge about books or selling books beforehand. It was just looking for that trend. Is that really just a kind of an equivalent of what you were doing, looking for that trend to try to latch onto?
Yeah, if you're in a new sector, like let's say like AI is today, you don't necessarily know where to start because you're a youngster or newbie yourself. So you are going to at least do some research to say, hey, what could possibly work in this new distribution world? In our world, we didn't have a lot of capital to go create the markets. We were definitely going to try and do something that we think could work. And there wasn't a lot of research to be done, by the way, either, because you had Excite and AltaVista. There wasn't, there was pre-Google being a force of nature. And so we did want to make sure that whatever we do, we could do something that the market has already indicated that they will be willing to spend money on. So, but then that problem hit us because the average person only read email every third day. And so our offer would expire in 24 hours. And so now you have a problem because we did all of this work to get the inventory and procure the inventory from low-cost airlines, only for it to not be sold and ultimately not move. And long story short, in my optometry days, of course, I was exposed to pagers and urgent priority messaging and getting hold of people when you need to do it urgently. And there was no pagers that the average consumer carried around, but this was the time when mobile phone penetration started to lift. And we really thought about the simple idea to say, hey, can we take these travel deals and deliver them via text message to a subscriber base that said, hey, I'm willing to receive these notifications for low-cost offers, only to find that that capability did not exist. We spent 3 months on AltaVista, Excite, and others to try and find a way to get information from a website to a mobile phone in real time. And lo and behold, it didn't exist. So we tore up the business plan.
This is where most people just give up, though. It doesn't exist. They just stop and they go back and look for something else. You didn't.
No, but again, I think we were just fearless. We were and young and dumb, but we just felt that this is a much bigger thing to go and solve, and that somebody would want to solve it. It might as well be us. And so it is true that if it existed, there's a lot of people say, how can you claim that you were the first SMS gateway in the world? And for us, it's a simple answer. If the SMS gateway existed in August 2000, we would be Expedia, hopefully, our travel business today, which probably would have been a better outcome in some respects. But no, we went to create it.
Okay, now every time you read a story from Silicon Valley, it's always in a garage, and I've always got this picture of a Jobs or a Gates with some keyboard and wire and all that sort of stuff in terms of putting it together. You guys literally did that, though. From my understanding, you worked out how to go and effectively send messages similar to email, to go and receive it on a laptop that you've actually set up and plugged into a mobile phone, and start sending text messages directly from your own equipment. And that started to then move into is that roughly correct of how this started, to prove that it could actually work?
Well, we did ask the mobile carriers back then, Vodacom and MTN, whether we can connect into their back-end infrastructure to do this. It was a flat no. And so they weren't very ceremonious about it. And so that was the second no, that, something we had to go figure out. But I was lucky. I had great co-founders in Patrick Lawson and my brother Casper, who's our deputy chief security officer today, still in the business. They were very smart and they were problem solvers. And they got the stuff to work through wires and cables and old Nokia phones. And I distinctly remember the radio playing music in the background. And back in the day, when a cell phone sent a text message, it would sort of have this da-da-da sound is interrupting the radio signal. And at some point, we had to turn the radio off because we couldn't hear any music. It was just constantly sending messages, hundreds of thousands of messages. And we very soon became the largest sender of mobile text messages in the African continent, literally within weeks.
That come about? Because I'm just trying to again go through this. I mean, you've just kind of make it sound so simple, but in your garage, effectively, you've created this new technology. You've proved it can work, but you've now got to go and turn it into a business. So you've got to go and find some customers. So how did you go about that? Because,
Hmm.
when you go and look at it, suddenly you've got 60, 70,000 customers. And I'm promising every startup I come across, B2B or B2C, doesn't often wake up and suddenly find they've got 60 or 70,000 customers. But you accelerated so quickly and actually had the other problem that it was non-profitable for you because you kept having to pick up all these SMS charges.
Yeah, it's a good question, Colin. We basically put out, first of all, the internet was smaller back then. So it's much harder today for founders to get notoriety or a footprint on the internet because there's so much competition and a lot of companies. But back in 2000, the internet was infinitely smaller, number one. Number two, we were a first mover with a pretty unique capability, which enabled software or websites to speak to mobile phone via text message. So we put it out there for free. And essentially, you're opening any website, could cut and paste 4 lines of code onto their sort of HTML page, and then it would enable the sending of a text message anywhere in the world. And we didn't know what people will use it for. Some golfing websites use it to book golf tee-off times, and some websites use it for critical notifications, and some websites use it for just connecting people. So there's a whole range of things that happen just by putting it out there that we didn't know how people will use it. But what we did know is that it was costing us a fortune every month because we had to pay for these SMSs to the mobile carriers, and we had no idea how we were going to pay for them. And so it is also a moment where we, again, were quite reckless as youngsters. And probably today, it would be difficult to do those things because there's just so much more regulation and rules.
Maybe we can just take a moment to answer Nandi's question. I think you're sort of halfway to doing that, but what were the signals that you picked up on that gave you the confidence to keep doing this? One signal is you're losing a lot of money, but on the other hand, you carried on persevering here and you didn't give up.
Yeah, I think, I often say to entrepreneurs that you must first have real conviction yourself in that what you're doing is solving a problem or making the world a better place, or has some ability to unlock economic value. So you need to have conviction yourself. But then the most difficult part of any startup, I firmly believe, is the go-to-market. It's not the idea. There's a dime a dozen. It's not necessarily even convincing your first 1 or 2 customers. It is product market fit and go-to-market. Now, for us, we didn't understand those terms, by the way. When we started, we didn't know what go-to-market meant. We didn't know what product market fit was. But what we did know is that more than 67,000 websites had our code on their homepages. Now, again, that won't happen today. Casper, as a security officer, will tell you no one will put your code on their homepage today. But back then, it happened. And so we had thousands of websites all around the world who had these 4 lines of code embedded. And we were sending hundreds of thousands of messages a month. And so we realized pretty quickly that this product market fit, websites do want to be able to send notifications to their customers from online to offline, or from online to sort of mobile. But we still didn't have a clue how to make money from it. And until the day our angel investors arrived, and they basically told us that we need to monetize.
How did that actually come about? Lots of companies are sitting there and they're having this debate. Let's bootstrap, let's go and get investors. If we're getting investors, what's dilution? How much do you want to dilute? I don't want to dilute, especially when it's more than one founder. You've got a group of people. So how did that path work for you guys in terms of deciding that you actually wanted investors to come in and help you?
Yeah, there's a few things. We didn't have a lot of startup capital. I mean, we come from a upper middle class families, all of us in South Africa, but it's not like we had hundreds of thousands of dollars to start the business with. And so, I think our startup capital, our sort of bootstrap capital was sort of around $9,000 all in between the four of us. So we really did not have a lot of money. I sold my car, for example, to get some of that money and all of that. So when you start a business and you put something out there for free, but it's costing you money, you pretty soon have to sober up and realize that at some point these bills are going to have to be paid. And so we had quite a big telco bill ramping up, and we realized that there's a real demand opportunity here, but we'll have to build more features into the product, not just an API. And so back then we were still in South Africa. The startup ecosystem was early days and not very well conducive to ultimately growing and investing in businesses. So it was a very difficult time for us to be able to get to a place where we can raise capital. South Africa ecosystem was few and far between in terms of capital raising. But there was an event called First Tuesdays. And First Tuesdays was started by a guy called Mike Wright, a great guy. And this was the meeting place. Once a month, you have a small window to meet some investors and service providers. And we were lucky to meet our first investors at such an event. And yeah, I remember distinctly, maybe just a quick story, that the first meeting, they had jackets and ties, and we were in t-shirts. And then the second meeting, we had jackets, and then they had no ties, but no jackets. So we realized that in that instance, we were both trying to come closer culturally to each other, and that there's probably a deal to be had.
Very cool. We've got First Thursdays now. I guess that's just kind of something similar. Innovation City doing similar events, and Suits and Sneakers bringing people. It's actually quite a thriving community that's being created here down in the Cape, which is impressive. I'm probably asking this a little bit early, so I'm going to make a marker to come back to this. But I do want to compare and contrast that community that you found in LA and Silicon Valley to what we're actually building here. But let's get there first. And we can get there like this, because at some point you've realized that you can't go and run this business just purely from South Africa. Someone must have guided you and said, if you want proper funding, if you really want to go and scale, you're going to go and have to look outside of our borders. How did that process come about?
Yeah, it was quite a sobering reality that there was private equity funding in South Africa at the time. And then most of those private equity funding came with EBITDA positive goals. So that was one of our mistakes we've made as well, that we signed up onto EBITDA goals early in our journey, and we didn't really even understand what EBITDA meant at the time, to be honest. But we would take the capital regardless. But when we realized and sort of sobered up a bit, it was clear to us that the capital and venture capital was really only going to come from the UK or the US markets. Certainly at the time in South Africa, and so we will have to go and get the capital from those markets. And if you're going to get on a plane, in any case, to go seek capital, you might as well go, in our case, to the West, to the US, because they just had so much more. Because while the UK was doing venture capital at the time, it certainly was a fraction of what the US was doing. But I often tell founders that when you leave Buenos Aires or any other emerging market to go raise capital in the US, no one is waiting for you at San Francisco airport with a welcome banner and say, hey, how can we help you? I mean, it's a incredibly daunting and intimidating place. You drive on the 101 and you see all of these names of Intel and Oracle, and you just realize it's big, it's foreign, and you have very little context. So yeah, it was quite a moment for us. I remember driving up and down Sandhill Road, handing out business plans, printed business plans, and little mini discs, because it was very cool at the time to have your business plan on a mini CD or disc, for those that can remember what those were. And I probably handed out about, 45 business plans, very nicely prepared, and I think we got zero replies from that moment. So it wasn't easy the first time around, but essentially we identified a company in Silicon Valley called Multimode that we looked to acquire through a stock transaction. And because of their footprint in San Mateo, which is in the heart of Silicon Valley, we were able to then get access to US capital. And by that time, we were an $11 million business, profitable. And we started all of that with about a $60,000 angel investment. So we were off to the races. We worked really hard for 5 solid years. Everything was just humming, but we worked crazy hours and had some luck on the way as well.
Did you get to meet these, players? And I'll cut to the chase on this question. How much have you used your South Africanness in building your networks, overseas? There's so many people when we go and look who have been successful in the US. There's lots of, we were chatting about this beforehand, actually, organizations like the Lekker Network trying to help SAFAs around the world actually meet each other. No matter how you phrase it, people deal with people. And obviously, when you have networks, it is a really, really important enabler to go and get access, to people. And clearly, there's a lot of very, very successful South Africans that are operating, overseas. So I'm sure you've been asked this 1,000 times whether, it was the South African background that helped you to get into Sequoia, for example, where, is it Roelof who's the kind of managing director?
Yeah, so the first part of your question is we were competing with this company called Multimode at Oracle. And they did multimodal messaging, so email, fax, and voice. And they were starting to get into text or SMS. And we were doing all of the text notifications for Oracle. And we realized that we had to have a local presence. We were getting to more and more the enterprise market. By that time, we were doing work for Visa, via a lot of US brands. And they had an expectation for us to be an enterprise-grade company and that we had boots on the ground in country. So we realized it's only a matter of time that we either will lose the business or we'll need to invest into a local presence in the US market. So that was one part. And then sort of it had 2 purposes, both presence in the US, but also then a vehicle into which we can raise capital. On Roelof, of course, Roelof is an incredibly accomplished South African, and he's Afrikaans. And actually, my dad was very close to Puk Botha, his grandfather. But I didn't even know Roelof existed, let alone that he worked at Sequoia. So we happened to meet him when we did a roadshow for fundraising. And so there was no prior network. Also, another little secret, Colin, is that most technology founders are not that good as extroverts. They're a little bit more shy and introverted. And so I certainly did not have the Midas touch on understanding the importance of networking at that age. We were very much enthralled with solving problems. Needless to say, Roelof, of course, was very helpful. We had 3 term sheets at the time, but we picked Sequoia at the time because their term sheet was a 2-pager, very straightforward. And they were an incredible capital partner and very supportive. And so, yeah, we had a great journey with Sequoia, and certainly we're a big fan of the work that they do and the way they support partners.
Look, I think, and again, I think there's a question here. It's not quite a statement, but let's see, let's see where it goes. Sequoia capital is one thing, but when I look at the investor community, and we can, talk about, Y Combinator and all of these guys, capital seems to be, it's important, but there are lots of avenues you can go and ask for capital. But the guys that really benefit are ones where those capital providers bring these incredible networks and they bring advice and opportunity. And that also seemed to be, a real benefit for you guys, because was it not through Sequoia that, for example, they got introduced into WhatsApp?
So networks are incredibly important. And certainly while I may have been naive about it when I was younger, it is almost, a table stakes requirement today, because the reality is that companies and capital allocators bet on people in these early stages. There's not a whole lot that you have to show for it. We had more to show for it, of course, because of some luck and hard work. But most of the time, when you're on angel or Series A territory, you're betting on the founders and the team. And the way part of that betting rationale is to have, your network having vetted them in some way, shape, or form. So that's why networks are super important. It also shortens the diligence cycle and for a whole range of things. And people can cross-reference people, because in the end, you want to make sure that you associate yourself with, good actors. In terms of your comment around WhatsApp and Sequoia, Sequoia actually did not introduce us to WhatsApp. We happen to have the same investor in Sequoia, but Jan Combe, the founder, and Brian, they are tinkerers, right? They're technologists, and they were building things on Clickatell's platform and API for many years back, before they even started WhatsApp, because we were the first SMS platform in the market, and they understood messaging intimately at the time. So we were really just lucky that our paths crossed with Jan and Brian, and certainly having then joint investors, there's some commonality. We could actually elevate the conversation to other things. But yeah, that network is incredibly important, and hence we're doing a lot of work to help foster relationships, whether it's through Endeavor or through Simadisa, to help foster those relationships and networks, because the world's a very lonely place if you don't have it.
Let's talk about that now, because obviously being out, you said it, being out in Silicon Valley was, incredibly important. Back then, no one's going to invest directly into South Africa if you're not present in Silicon Valley. And I've had this conversation with other, leaders in this space, and it's consistent. You've got to be there, you've got to be present. They've got 60, 70 years of history of running this particular VC model, where they're preferring people who've gone to certain Ivy League schools, but at the very least, they like the people. You've got the idea. You maybe have had a couple of business failures beforehand. You've got backing, or you're at, you've gone to this Ivy League, place, and then you've got this incredible incubation cycle where people are willing to then take the risk. You step out of it, and they're not quite so willing. They feel out of control, and outside of it clearly means South Africa. So I've got a vision, I've got a hope that we're going to start to see that transform, and we're going to see a lot more interest coming through into South Africa, because with people like yourself and some of the other businesses that have been successful, Time Bank, for example, is another great example of a successful South African business. You can go back, Discovery, we've got Capitec. We've actually got some really, really great businesses, rock star businesses that deserve a presence on the global stage. Do you think we're going to see, or are we starting to see more interest from Silicon VCs into South Africa?
Yeah, it's a very loaded question, Colin. I have many views on it. I mean, I think that, first of all, it is true that South Africa has got very capable entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial talents. And there's a underlying current of strong entrepreneurs across the spectrum, and also strong technical know-how. But we have fallen behind, actually, in terms of entrepreneurs being able to go abroad, raise capital, and be successful. We were arguably ahead of many of the African markets back in 2000 to 2005 timeframe. But we have still some isolation type policies and things that hold us back. And we had this conversation at a dinner just last week with some Endeavor entrepreneurs at my house. And we were discussing, and these were some entrepreneurs from the Netherlands, and from Germany and other places. And we were in the US, and we were speaking about this idea that Nigeria, Kenya is leapfrogging us in terms of entrepreneurs and successful exits and raising capital abroad. And the reality is that unless our policymakers really look into what our isolation policies have done in the apartheid era, that still got some remnants in today's time, things like some of the exchange control regulations, complicated things to navigate for foreign investors. So in our case, for example, while we got a term sheet from 3 venture capitalist firms in Silicon Valley, all 3 said to us very plainly, there's the term sheet, but we will only do the investment in a Delaware corporation. We're not going to try and understand South African law. So go and solve that. And needless to say, it took us 18 months and more than $800,000 in legal fees to get that special dispensation and approval to do that transaction. So it was a very difficult time, and it's certainly not a scalable proposition for South African founders and companies to go through that. So we have the potential in terms of entrepreneurs. We have the know-how in terms of the technical capability in the country. We certainly have showpieces to demonstrate that, but we will stay stuck and not have the multiplier effect that countries like Turkey, companies like Brazil have had in terms of outlier outcomes for founders, unless we look at our policy framework in South Africa.
Was it issues like this that encouraged you to get involved with Endeavour and to set up your own initiatives like the Collective X and Simadisa? I don't know how you find the time basically, because you're still a full-time founder and CEO of a company which is still growing at an extraordinary rate. Something must have been really driving you there to want to allocate time for Simadisa, the Collective X and Endeavour, because these are not timeless pursuits.
No, they're not timeless at all. I'm deeply passionate about it. I was fortunate enough to meet Bill Gates once in a one-on-one, and he set up a conversation and basically made the comment that, if you want to have impact as a founder in whatever area of interest, one should not wait until you're successful to do that. And that really sort of spoke to me and kind of was an important sort of moment of personal growth for me. And when I look at the work that Simadisa is doing, which means to lead or to shepherd around the policy reform for the Startup Act in South Africa, this is very important work to unlock our future high growth companies in the country. And that's something I'm deeply passionate about, because I think a country will grow if its economy can be set free, and if that happens, then you have employment and all kinds of things, that flows from there. On the Collective X, it's about digital skills. Now the AI reality has changed some of those dynamics, but South Africa has an incredible youth population that are inquisitive, that are hardworking, and wants opportunities. And I think if we really get our act together as an industry and create the anchor tenants to create these digital skills and jobs, then the companies in the country will thrive. So there's a lot of things to be done. I am lucky that these organizations have got great leadership, and I am lucky that my team within Clickatell is giving me the freedom to spend time and energy on some of these things that are near and dear to my heart, and obviously in the interest of not just me, but others.
But it's so important when I go and look at this, because as you said at the start, we've got lots of great examples of entrepreneurs and businesses that have been set up in South Africa and they've gone global, or they've done these incredible things. What I'm seeing over the last 5 to 10 years is this collection of different people coming and starting to collaborate together. Sometimes in competition, but even if they're in the same industries, they're still collaborating. They're still working together in one way or another, skills development, or they're in a community where they meet regularly and they're sharing ideas. And then we start to see that sort of trickle up effect as, you've got initial investors that are coming in, and then Series A and Series B are starting to come in, and the profile starts to go and get larger. And then eventually you start to see that going through to the rest of the world, and more people coming across. I've got dreams that we're going to see, in the next couple of years, a lot more VCs coming across, flying across from the US to come and join, say, some of the guys that have already started coming down from Northern Europe. Am I being overly positive here? Or are you also seeing, similar kind of progress in bringing together these communities and creating this kind of it's almost a mini Silicon Valley type environment?
Yeah, first of all, I think the world's infinitely more complex today than it used to be. So you need communities to help traverse the complexity, because there's many elements within both the tech sector and non-tech sector, number one. Secondly, I'll just go a step back with Simadisa, for example. we created the first dialogue between government, educators, and startup founders more than 10 years ago. And that was an important moment in time because there's a lot of distrust between private sector and public sector for whatever reason. And so it is true that unless those sectors get into dialogue more frequently, more often, in a transparent manner, not a manner to sort of for anyone's own interest, that you need that dialogue to be able to traverse a very fast changing world. So it is my wish that private sector in forums that are transparent and open, not behind closed doors, private side transaction, but an open, transparent dialogue, navigate the complexity between a changing world we live in and policies and citizenry that needs to change and adapt. So, but you'll find that organizations like Endeavour, organizations like Silicon Cape and VC for Africa and Innovation City, these are very important ecosystem participants and players in a market like South Africa, but also you have equivalent organizations in the US, in LATAM, to help the dialogue around moving things forward, to help companies thrive and to help create overall uplift in societies.
I'm going to put Anton on the spot now. I don't know, Anton, if you're ready to talk, but I'm allowing you to talk. Are you there?
All right. Thanks very much, Cole. There we go. Pieter, thank you for an incredible set of insights and lessons, and with the amazing humility with which you offer such valuable learning. So thank you so much for that. I'm really curious. You're operating in an incredibly fast-moving environment, probably faster than even the fast ones we're operating in. But how do you and your team stay ahead of the next sort of step change in your domain? And then linked with that, what do you think your next most scary competitor might be?
Yeah, thanks, Anton. I'm very proud of the work that our team has done. There's not many companies that has multiple worlds first, from SMS gateways to the first payments inside of WhatsApp to the first KYC banking on the largest chat platform in the world. So these things don't happen through osmosis. They happen with real hard work and a massive sense of curiosity and creativity. And those are two of our values in the company. I did say to someone recently that we don't grow companies as founders or executive management teams. They really grow us. And so the founder I am today in the company is very different to the founder I was in the living room helping Casper lay down cables. And so I do feel that as with changing environments around us, you as a founder or executive team need to be as agile and growth orientated on that famous learning journey word that we all love so much. Otherwise, you stand no chance. The other thing I'll say is that a 25-year-old technology company is not something you see often. And so we are lucky, and we were lucky in that our funders allowed us some of these milestones and horizons without ripping the carpet from underneath us. Because when you are on an 8-year hamster cycle for venture capital returns, it's incredibly difficult to do your long-range planning, to keep innovating for a particular vision that you have in the world, as opposed to just finding your next exit or the quick wins. And so there's a whole range of things that I can spend more time on, but in interest of time, I won't go too deep. But essentially, to your question, you need to have the internal culture of being curious, have that conviction that your problem that you're solving has not been solved yet, and that you'll need to use more tooling and capabilities to achieve that. And to that point, our why statement in the company is to give people back time. And if you use one of our client services, which is, for example, the FlySafair WhatsApp check-in facility, which runs on our chat commerce platform, then I would like to make the claim that I think it's the quickest airline check-in experience in the world. And if it's not, please come tell me, because I haven't found the other one yet. But that's a simple example of how your why statement can reflect itself into your client's outcomes if you are really deliberate around delivering ROI and not just the next sort of AI model in the market. And that kind of brings me to your last part of your question around what scares me about the universe, and what's coming in our next competitor. I'm not so scared about the competitor. Really, I'm not. We don't constantly monitor what the competition is doing. What scares me is often what we call the intern and the spreadsheet. Or to be more clear, the CTO or CIO who thinks that this stuff is easy and they'll just build it themselves. Because we have a culture in some markets where there's a massive desire for middle management to actuate and manifest their next career jump, whether it's AI or conversational commerce or whatnot. And so you'll do a lot of education and thought leadership and sharing of what's capable, only to find that the company is going to try and build it themselves. And so that's the piece that keeps me up at night, as opposed to a direct competitor. And the market takes a while to run through that. And once those projects don't come off in the right manner, then you get the opportunity to actually then get the business. But that can be a long cycle, and a lot of opportunity then falls by the wayside.
All right, Jacques, you got a good question there.
Yeah, thanks, Pieter. It's been truly inspiring. I wanted to ask you, knowing what you know, would you do it all over in South Africa again? Would you start in South Africa? Or knowing what you know about capital and talent and how hard it is to scale, would you choose some other launch pad?
Great
Yeah,
question.
Jacques, it's a very tough question for me to answer, simply because, to be honest, if I'm truthful, I won't start it here, because it's just too hard. It nearly crushed our business. But and I also see a lot of entrepreneurs leaving the country, going to the UK, going to the Netherlands, other places to start their businesses. And it's very sad, because not only do you lose the cross-pollination of what comes in a thriving startup ecosystem, a lot of the job creation, knowledge creation, then starts sitting outside of the country. And so I am hopeful, by the way, because right now we are making progress with the Reserve Bank and SARS, the tax authority in South Africa, to allow companies to do some of the international fundraising through what we call a permissible loop. It's a test opportunity at the moment with them. So if you are interested in that, or if there's any founder on the call that's currently thinking about moving abroad, their company, reach out through Colin with me, because we hope we have some good news for you. But so what's my answer? My answer is that I'm hoping the answer to you, Jacques, in about 5 months can be a resounding yes. I'll do it all over again in South Africa, and you're good, as opposed to say to you that in the current policy dispensation, it is difficult to make it happen from here.
Super. Yeah, thank you. That's insightful.
Thanks, Jacques. Question here from Rob. When in the idea, and another great question, by the way, I just want to introduce it properly. It's one I was going to ask if Rob hadn't. When in the idea development phase is the best time to approach a VC, and how do you protect that idea?
Don't come back at me if this bites you in the backside, but stop worrying about protecting your idea. It's only going to slow you down. Most VCs won't sign NDAs. If you're concerned about someone in that VC's portfolio that might take your idea, then don't pitch to them. But protecting your idea is something I was worried as a youngster back in the day, and it means nothing, because at the World of innovation and AI. I think these ideas are going to be all over the place in terms of protection, and you want to rather get out of the gates and get running. I'll give you a quick example. The moment we set our foot in the US market, in other words, we became a US corporation in 2007, we had a lawsuit arrive, like almost within a week, that we were infringing on someone's application to mobile phone SMS patent. And the reality is that patent was filed in 2002. And we could luckily prove that we were in market with that capability commercially 2 years prior. And so we were able to bat that thing because we were in market first. So protecting your idea, I just think that the world's changed so much, and AI probably knows your idea already. And so just get on with it and rather, find other ways to protect it. But then in terms of VCs and when to speak to them, look, it's a question of market maturity. South African venture capital firms are increasingly looking for revenue evidence. That doesn't help a founder who hasn't got product market fit yet, or an early product idea fits range. And so do your homework on the venture capital firms in terms of their agenda, their fund mandates, and so ask them straight up, are you investing at this stage? Otherwise, you're wasting your time. And so there's only a handful of capital allocators in South Africa. You can go to SAFCA, South African Venture Capital Association's website. They're all listed there. Or you can ask around the folks at Innovation City or Silicon Cape. They can tell you the list of folks. But do your homework in terms of, are they a fit for where you are in your stage? And if you are very early, you're better off trying to find an angel network or one or two angel investors to prove out your idea. But this idea of seed or bootstrap, seed through angels, Series A, B, and C, that's universal everywhere if you do capital allocation or raising. But in South Africa, do your homework to make sure that the people you're speaking to actually write those checks. Otherwise, you waste a lot of time.
Lovely. Carleen, have you got a question there?
Hi, lovely to speak to you again, Peter. I don't know if you remember me from about 22 years ago working at Clickatell. Now that you've been running this successful business for 25 years, if you could go back 25 years ago and talk to yourself, knowing what you know now, what's the biggest hint or tip that you would give yourself as a starting entrepreneur?
Yeah, you would think I get that question often. I actually don't, but I do know founders get that question often, and probably a question I dread a little bit. But thinking as you were asking the question, Carleen, and very nice to hear you on the podcast. I think it would be to take even more risk. We were the first providers of one-time pins in the world on SMS. We were the first providers. We served United Airlines. The plane crash that happened in the Hudson River in New York with Captain Sully, that entire rescue effort was done on our platform on the day. When Obama did this trip to Cairo and Ghana, you could text a message from the streets of Accra to the most powerful leader at the time, and he would answer you in real time. And we did that work for the US State Department. But in late 2007, early 2008, the US regulator told us we can't just enable any business to send a text message because consumers were paying to receive a message. And then we backed down. And by backing down, we created sort of the open space for a company called Twilio to beat us to the punch. And they really just took our market share and ran with it. And they were more, brazen perhaps with the regulator, and they were early stage, they had less to lose. But that's one of my regrets, that we were quite conservative. We grew up in conservative households as South Africans. We are kind of rules-based and rules followers. I can tell you many stories of multi-million-dollar accounts that we lost because we were following the rules. Now, I will still do the same, follow the rules, but I wish we took a bit more risk when we were younger in some of these markets. and not always be so compliant. But that, please don't quote me, because my current investors will be very anxious if they think I want to start breaking rules.
Another a nice question. It's anonymous, but I've been curious about this. How can I phrase it? The last thing I read, you've already done, very well. You're a, what do they call them? A nearly con, almost a unicorn. 500 or so was the last valuation I saw. You've got aspirations to still be bigger and go global. As a private company, it's difficult getting valuations out of you guys. What can you tell us about your, kind of valuations and where you hope to be? Do you hope to list? Are you looking for more investors? What's the kind of plan looking forward?
Yeah, Colin, I really warn founders often about this valuation treadmill, because the valuation is only one part of what you see. It really is the terms of the deal that matter. And so I think a lot of the unicorns, if you look inside those term sheets, there'll be 2, 3, 4 times liquidation preferences. There will be warrants for performances. I mean, those get gnarly quickly. So for me, capital raising is something to enable your business and your vision for the company and your teams. That it should not be the headline. And so we were lucky in raising proper capital over the years from incredible investors. But those are headlines that journalists want to write about. Those aren't the headlines that matter. The headlines that matter is how have we helped Discovery to do better for their clients, or ABSA, or Standard Bank, or FlySafair, or Discam, or Pick and Pay, or Europcar, or Walmart subsidiaries in Builders and those companies. So I do feel we've got the Silicon Valley capital raise headline thing happening, and then founders think that they've arrived if they have decacorn and unicorn status. But I can hand on heart say that I personally know very closely about 16 unicorn founders, proper unicorn founders. Their lives are very complex. Those are very dark moments, and what the headlines is not what it cracks up to be. Those are tough places to be, with investors breathing down your neck, with all kinds of performance things. Those are tough places. So I do feel, and that's partly why we're also a 25-year-old technology company. We were lucky in that we didn't give away crazy terms for crazy valuations, but rather reasonable valuations at reasonable terms, so we can get on with building a great company that solves real problems.
Yes or no? Have you got any aspirations to list? I know some founders still wish to do that. There's a big debate going on in the US at the moment about whether it's even worth doing, with the massive investment that's going into, particularly AI. I mean, you think about OpenAI and the valuations, they're getting far more liquidity by staying private, it seems, at the moment. So this debate about to list or not to list is very current. What's your view there? Oh, we've only got 1 minute.
Question, Colin. Yes, no answer to the long question.
Okay.
I personally do not want to be a public company CEO unless I can help it. But listing, of course, is a way for companies to realize value for their shareholders. And is Clickatell a listable and listing material as a company? Absolutely, yes. People may not know that, but we were about 4 weeks away from listing at some point in our journey, until the market changed and we decided to go raise capital privately.
Okay, that's about the most I could hope for with a minute to go. Pieter, I just want to say thank you very much for joining us. To everyone else on the call who participated or just listened in, thank you very much as well. Next up at the end of the month is going to be the Go One story with Melvin Lubecka, another unicorn, another South African that's been driving that one as a co-founder. I'm really looking forward to that. 17,000 businesses which their platform has been used for. If you have never heard of them, this is a proper story. That's on the 30th of September. Again, I want to thank AWS Startups and particularly Henry Zietzman for backing this particular series. We're very difficult to get access to people like Pieter without sponsors like that. Thanks to Silicon Overdrive, AWS's platinum partner, for backing this as well. Obviously, very important for me as they're funding it. Then as we go through, we've got some supporters: Africa Arena, Chisel Group, FDC, Endeavour, Crossfin, Future World and Innovation City, who are also co-marketing. To all of you, thank you very much. I hope it's got the knowledge out to people to listen into these events. With that, everyone, I wish you all a fantastic Monday, a fantastic week, and we'll chat to you all soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.